that your testimony will not be used either directly or indirectly against you in any subsequent proceedings by this court, except those under Article 70 and 71, which are the offenses against the court, if you do not say the truth. Accordingly, if any question is asked that could lead to your self-incrimination, we will hear your answer in private session and keep this answer confidential. Each questioning party is responsible for requesting private sessions prior to asking questions that may lead you to incriminate yourself, and obviously also duty counsel should be alert to intervene if he deems it appropriate. And yourself, of course, you may ask at any time for a private session if you deem this necessary. Have you understood?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Answer yes, Mr. President.
Now I come to make you some recommendation as far as the language we all use is concerned. Because since you will be testifying in French and I'm speaking in English, we need interpretation in order to understand each other. So it is important that you speak slowly, as I'm speaking slowly, to help the interpreters and the court reporters to interpret correctly and to write down correctly the questions and the answers. So please, again, speak slowly, and after having listened to a question, wait for a couple of seconds and then start to respond, so to put also the interpreters and the court reporters in the best position to do their job. This is even more important when it comes to questions in the same language. If the questioner speaks with you in French and you reply in French, obviously the temptation to respond immediately is very big. But I will in any case sometimes give you some hint in order to slow down if you're going too fast. Now I come to your testimony. You are obviously aware that this chamber has been established to try the case of the prosecutor against Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Blegude. And you, as a witness to this trial, you are called to assist us in our search for the truth. And in order to do so, you will be asked questions by the prosecutor and by both defense teams, the defense team of Mr. Gbagbo and the defense team of Mr. Blegude. And maybe you are also asked questions by the chamber. If at any time you have any problem to raise, you just raise them with me, and if you're tired, if you have any problem. So I will take care of those problems you might raise with the chamber. Is this okay with you?
Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, as a witness, you have the one obligation, the obligation to tell the truth, to answer truthfully to the questions the parties put to you. And you're required by law, prior to starting the questioning, to make a solemn undertaking to the effect that you will tell the truth. And therefore, I would ask you to repeat the words which are set out in Rule 66(1) of our legal framework, of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence. Please, can you read out the formula you have in front of you? Thank you.
Engagement solennel.
Witness, solemn undertaking. I solemnly declare that I shall speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. The last thing I have to tell you is that not saying the truth is an offense against the court and as such punishable. So please, I think now I've finished this first part, and we can start with the questioning. And to this effect, I give the floor to the office of the prosecutor, to Mr. Pak, I suppose.
Yes, you suppose correctly, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours. Good morning, Mr. Witness. My name is Melissa Pak. We met last week briefly at the courtesy meeting. I'll be asking you questions today on behalf of the prosecution. My colleague, Ms. Rodriguez, sits to my left. Just as His Honour has indicated, I too will be addressing you as Mr. Witness. I mean no disrespect by that. I won't be referring to you by your rank. It's the custom of this court, as His Honour has said. Now, I wanted to address first with you some preliminary matters related to your background. Firstly, your rank, please.
J'étais et je suis.
I was and I am a Major General.
And your ethnicity, please.
Je suis gourou.
Answer, I am Guru.
Now, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your university and military education and qualifications. If we could just start from university level, just if you would briefly describe your education at that level and at the level of military training.
J'étais à l'université.
I attended the University of Abidjan. Then I went to the officers' school. I attended the officers' academy in Côte d'Ivoire, and then I traveled to France. I attended 2 officers' schools in France, graduating as a lieutenant before joining the gendarmerie of Côte d'Ivoire.
And what did you study at university? Can you tell us the subject?
Le droit.
law.
Now, going on from that, just if you would briefly summarize the positions that you held in Côte d'Ivoire before your retirement.
Le dernier poste que j'ai occupé,
The last post that I occupied, I was a commander of the gendarmerie school in Abidjan. At the same time, I was the commando of the command center for security operations, that is SECOS. Those were the last two positions that I occupied. If you want me to go back in time, I can do that.
Stay with that, thank you. And just again, preliminary matters. You were interviewed by the Office of the Prosecutor, and just to check that you recall, you were interviewed, the long interviews in October 2011, 10th to 12th of October, and in September, 10th to 11th of September 2013. Is that correct?
affirmatif.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to deal with just one other preliminary matter. I'm going to be asking you questions about the post-electoral crisis in Côte d'Ivoire in 2010 and 11. After the crisis, were there any legal proceedings initiated against you in Côte d'Ivoire?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
Can you tell us what those proceedings were and what the outcome was of those proceedings?
Oh, il y a eu tellement de poursuites.
There were so many proceedings, I do not know where to begin. I was charged with armed or hold-ups and then I was prosecuted for attack against the security of the state. There were so many charges, I really do not remember all.
Briefly then, what was the outcome of those charges or prosecutions?
And then I was prosecuted.
Les juges d'instruction qui avaient...
The investigating magistrates who were in charge of the files questioned me several times. Then I was placed under formal investigation and indicted, but I remained free up till the present time.
Okay, I'm going to move on now, more specifically to the roles that you occupied during the post-electoral crisis. I'll start with your role as commander of the gendarmerie school, the École de Gendarmerie. Now, there are how many gendarmerie schools in Côte d'Ivoire?
2.
2.
And you were commander of the school in Abidjan, is that right?
That is correct.
Who were you training there?
J'ai formé...
I was training future non-commissioned officers of the gendarmerie and future officers of the gendarmerie.
What were your duties as the commander of the school?
C'était de veiller
It was to ensure all the trainings of the two cycles, that is the cycle for the NCOs and the officers' cycle. To that effect, I had about 100 instructors under my responsibility, both officers and non-commissioned officers.
The instructors, who were they? What were their qualifications?
les instructeurs.
The instructors who were officers of the Côte d'Ivoire gendarmerie, and some of them were commanders of units in Abidjan. There were also magistrates, university lecturers who were part-time lecturers to give lectures to the officers. At the cycle of the NCOs, the instructors were both NCOs and officers of the National Gendarmerie.
And as a commander of the gendarmerie school, who were you subordinate to?
Le commandant supérieur.
The Commandant Superior, or the Supreme Commander of the National Gendarmerie.
That was General Cazarate, is that right?
Affirmatif.
Yes, that's correct.
As commander of the gendarmerie school, did you have forces under your command?
Négatif.
No.
Were students at the school used during operations in any circumstances?
Les textes.
The instruments or texts provide that a gendarmerie school constitutes a reserve that can become available to the Supreme Commander of the Gendarmerie of Côte d'Ivoire under specific circumstances and upon his request.
And what circumstances would those be, in summary?
En cas de crise.
In case of crisis, and should the Supreme Commander deem it necessary for intervention units to be reinforced, he can apply that provision of the instrument whereby the gendarmerie school can provide reserves for purposes of intervention.
And you mentioned their intervention units. I take it you're talking about gendarmerie intervention units that might need to be reinforced?
Affirmatif.
That is correct.
Which in particular?
Mais toutes les unités de gendarmerie.
All gendarmerie units of the National Gendarmerie of Côte d'Ivoire, not only the intervention units in Abidjan, all intervention units across Côte d'Ivoire, regardless of their location.
intervention unit, though, when you think about Abidjan, can you just tell us, please, the intervention units for the gendarmerie in Abidjan to which you're referring?
Je ne commande pas la gendarmerie nationale.
I was not the commander of the National Gendarmerie, and I cannot talk to you about the units of the gendarmerie. Please put questions to me about the gendarmerie school, and I'll be able to answer.
You told us that General Cazarate was the one who would make the request for the students to reinforce intervention units. Who would he make that request of?
Le général Kasserate,
General Kasserate, the Supreme Commander of the National Gendarmerie, does not make any requests. It is the instruments that provide that the gendarmerie school shall be a reserve source, so to speak, for the gendarmerie, which is available to him. So what he simply does is implement the said instrument.
You're commander of the school, obviously, and you have students at the school being trained. When they are to be deployed to gendarmerie intervention units, is a request made of you by Cazarati to use those students to make them available?
peut-être qu'on a un problème de
Maybe we have a problem of semantics. The Supreme Commander does not make requests of the commander of the school. He issues instructions to the commander of the school.
Okay. Now, when these students go and reinforce units, gendarmerie units, are they armed? Were they armed?
D'abord, il faut dire que ce n'est pas tout.
And so, first of all, we must say that not all students qualify to do that. It is only students of the second year who have already received proper training in the first year who can be assigned in such a manner. Some officers can also be assigned accordingly. And officers are people who have already received 2 years of training in military school before joining the gendarmerie. That's a point I would like to clarify. Now, first point. Secondly, when I receive instructions from the Supreme Commander to make available to him reinforcements from the gendarmerie school, at the same time, he provides me with specifics as to the type of troops he wants. And so I send the troops to the various units for which such reinforcement have been requested. And it is the commanders of the various units who now manage the assigned students, providing them the necessary guidance and deployment on the ground.
Related to weapons equipment. So when the students are then assigned to units, are they armed?
C'est ce que je vous précise.
That's exactly what I'm saying, that they receive weapons from the units to which they have been assigned. When they are assigned, they are sent without any weapons. They are dispatched without any weapons.
And just closing up on this topic, so you've mentioned second-year students being assigned to go and reinforce these units, and also officers. Who would select the students and the officers who would then be deployed to reinforce these gendarmerie intervention units? Who would make the selection?
Mais c'est l'école, son encadrement.
The school provides guidance under the leadership of its commander.
It's you, is it?
Oui.
Correct.
I'd like to look briefly at a document. If we can just turn to CIV OTP 00430225. It's item, for my friends, it's item 43 on the list of material, and it's confidential. Mr. Witness, a document's going to appear on the screen in front of you. If you find it difficult in any way to use the document on the screen, and sometimes it's easier to have a hard copy, just please do let me know. We have hard copies available. I hope you can see the document there appearing on the screen. Is it clear enough for you?
Il n'est pas à l'écran.
Not on the screen yet.
Is it on the screen now?
Non.
No.
The document is displayed on the Evidence One channel.
Please do just take your time, and if we can just move slowly down to the bottom of the page, just to see the signature there and the stamp. Is this a document that you recognise?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
And just to read on to the record very briefly, dated the 8th of June 2010, it's in French, quote, fiche à l'attention du général de...
Fish for the Major General, Supreme Commander of the National Gendarmerie.
And we see at the bottom that it is signed with your name in type. Is that your signature there in the stamp at the bottom?
Affirmatif.
Yes, correct.
And it relates at the top, again, quoting in French, the objet as, in French, quote,
Subject. Beginning of the academic year.
2010 and 11. Now, could you just tell us in brief what this document relates to?
C'est une fiche.
This is a fiche in French, as indicated in French, fiche or a note which contains proposals and suggestions to the Supreme Commander of the National Gendarmerie from the commander of the school.
And it relates, let me just read the last paragraph and you can just help us with this. Quote, cette importante réserve de...
This important reserve of staff, thus made available, can become a choice reinforcement for the intervention units both during the pre-electoral and post-electoral periods.
You can just tell us, please, does this document then relate to preparations for the use of students during the electoral period of 2010?
Ce n'est pas le but de la fiche.
Answer. That is not the purpose of the note. The purpose of the note, basically, is to ensure that students who pass the competitive examination are made available to the school as of the month of September so that their training can begin. Their basic common training can begin. That is the purpose of the note. The purpose of the note is not basically in relation to the pre-electoral or post-electoral periods. However, since you have read this paragraph, it does indeed allude to the instruments which provide that the gendarmerie school shall constitute a pool of reservists at the disposition of the Supreme Commander. That is my understanding of that paragraph.
Okay, and the preceding paragraph, last sentence, just to ask you then briefly about this, quote, you've read that paragraph, take a look. The last sentence, ce qui permet d'envisager la fin.
Which makes it possible to envisage that this training shall end around the 15th of October, 2010.
So was this about the calendar for getting the training of students done by a certain date?
Nous avons des contraintes.
Answer. We had timing or scheduling constraints that were peculiar to the school. Basic training for students lasts for 45 days, and it is conducted outside of Abidjan, that is away from the location of the gendarmerie school. The idea, therefore, was to make these students available at a time when that basic training can be undertaken within what appeared to us to be reasonable time frames.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you a few questions about the early 2000s, and Your Honour, I'm very aware that I need to ask permission to do this. It'll be about 5 to 10 minutes of questions, the relevance of which will become clear, but that's it on the early 2000s, if I may. I'm grateful.
Of course, you can.
Still on the École de Gendarmerie, I wanted to ask you about the early 2000s, so not at the period of the post-electoral crisis. Was there a time when there was a mixed unit trained at the École de Gendarmerie?
À quelle période?
What period are you referring to, please?
2002, 2003, was there a time then when a mixed unit was trained at the École de Gendarmerie?
Si vous avez quelques éléments précis.
Now, if you have any specific data, please help me, remind me, and then I'll be able to answer you specifically.
And take you to your interview, and I'll find the relevant passage for you. It's 00510266. Now I'm going to look there at page 0274. Let me just find the page for you. Now, in fairness to you, let me just get the date. You're talking about, on the preceding page, on page 0274, the period 2002, approximately 2002. And then I'll take it from page 0275, and it's line 301. And it's talking there about the Minister of Defense at the time, Minister Prt1 Gbagbo. And you say this, ils ont pris des contacts avec des...
They contacted persons, some persons, to provide training, for units of the army, of the gendarmerie, of the police. They set up mixed units which were to be trained by those persons who would provide the training. Very well.
I'll continue, quote, personne entendue.
Person being interviewed to defend. That unit for training was based according to the instructions issued by the minister, were based at the gendarmerie school. Person interviewing, number one, okay. Person being interviewed. That unit was based at the École de Gendarmerie. There were gendarmes, soldiers, and policemen providing training for that unit there.
End quote. And you go on just at line 311 to say, ça, c'est en 2002?
That was in 2002, 2003.
Can you confirm that these were the words that you said in your interview with the Office of the Prosecutor? This would have been in September 2013.
Affirmatif.
Yes.
And are the contents there, what you say, is that true and accurate?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
And let me then go on with some questions about this mixed unit. When you say a mixed unit was formed, who, to your knowledge, formed a mixed unit at this time?
Cette unité a été mise.
That unit was set up by the minister himself, and he gave instructions to the supreme commander for that unit to be trained and hosted at the École de Gendarmerie, which therefore became the host and the trainer for that unit. But the unit and the trainers of that unit were selected by the minister's cabinet. We received instructions to make our facilities available to that unit during the entire period of their training.
Can you tell us then, you were hosting the unit and the trainers for the unit. Can you tell us who the trainers were?
Les personnes qui formaient l'unité, c'était des experts.
The trainers were experts, as well as some men from the army, from the police, and from the gendarmerie.
The trainers you describe as experts, where were they from?
Je ne suis pas en mesure de vous le dire, mais c'est des experts.
I'm not able to tell you, but they were experts. They were not Ivorian nationals, and I don't know where they came from.
What language did they speak?
Il y en a qui parlaient français.
Some of them spoke French, some spoke English, but generally speaking, everybody spoke French.
Men?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
How many of them were there?
Je ne connais pas le nombre. Je peux pas vous...
I don't know the number. I'm not in a position to tell you the number.
How long did they use your facility, the école, to train this mixed unit?
Je ne sais pas combien de temps ça a duré, mais ça...
I don't know how long it lasted, but several months it did.
Do you recall any of the names of the experts?
Ça fait très longtemps, donc si vous...
And these things happened a very long time ago, but maybe you can jog my memory if you have some names.
I'm referring to page 0276 of the interview, and I'm just going to read the names actually rather than read the passage, but it's at line 338, one of them, and line 360 to 362. Does the name Richard Sanders mean anything to you?
Oui, c'était un de ceux qui était...
He was one of those involved in the training. He was an instructor.
And another name I get from page 0277, line 365. Does the name Commandant Marquez mean anything to you?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
Who was he?
Il était un des experts.
He was one of the experts.
Do you know if these experts were paid?
J'ai précisé tout à l'heure que l'école...
A short while ago, I mentioned that the school only provided a facility for the training. Now, those other details I am not able to answer. I don't know where they came from. I don't know what they were. I knew when they were at the school that they were experts assigned to provide the training.
Were any of them South African trainers?
Je ne saurais le dire avec précision.
I am not in a position to provide you with a specific answer to that question. Some of them spoke English while others spoke French. So I must assume that they were from different backgrounds.
Now, we've been describing these men as experts. Were they soldiers? What was their expertise?
Ils faisaient de la formation militaire.
They were providing military training.
And can you describe the sort of training they were delivering?
C'était essentiellement de la formation.
It was basically training in combat techniques, classical combat, infantry training.
Just remind you of another part of your interview at page 0275. You tell us at line 318, 318, and I'm going to go to 323. Interviewer 1. Quand vous parlez de ces experts,
Interviewer 1, when you talk about these experts who were providing that training at the gendarmerie school, who were they? They were people of which nationality? Person interviewed? Well, there were South Africans. Interviewer 1. Black or white South Africans? Person interviewed. White South Africans. And then there were others who spoke French very fluently. So I suppose that they were French.
do you recall, is that accurate what's stated there? Do you confirm what you said there in your interview?
Oui.
Yes, indeed. Some of them spoke English. Some of those who spoke English were South Africans. Sanders, according to the students, he said he was a South African, so I confirm what is on this document.
And just to finish up on this topic, when the mixed unit, when it left the École de Gendarmerie, where did it go?
Elle a été déployée sur le terrain.
It was deployed in the field.
Which field?
Le théâtre d'opération, ils sont allés.
The field of operations, they went to Daloa and then to the west.
And what did they go to do there in the west?
Ils ont été déployés sur.
They were deployed in the field. When soldiers are deployed in the field, they are deployed in the field. It was at the height of the crisis already.
Did the trainers go with the mixed unit to the field? The expert trainers?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
Do you know, and please do say if you don't, but when they were in the field, this mixed unit and the experts that you've described, do you know who they reported to when they were there? If you don't, please say.
Je ne sais pas à qui.
I do not know who they reported to.
Well, let me just remind you of something you said in your interview. And again, I can just read the passage. It's at page 0278, the same interview. And I'm going to read from line 436. Personne
interviewed. They reported either to Mr. Cadet or to another officer who was at the presidency. There are two people to whom they reported at the presidency, and these were Colonel Glehi, he is now deceased.
And I'll, end quote, pause there and turn over to page 0279. And you say at line 446, you pick up personne entendu.
Person interviewed. They reported to him. They also reported to the état-major.
Ask who that was, and you say at line 452, c'était le général.
It was General Dje.
And then you're asked at line 460 and 461 the role of Glei, Colonel Glei, and you say the question at 460, c'était quoi son titre?
What was his position during that period? You say he was at the presidency?
Du?
Person interviewed? Yes, he was the chief of the personal military staff.
Trois.
Interviewer number 3. Chief of the personal military staff of Mr. Prt1 Gbagbo. Person interviewed, yes.
Now, is that what you said in your interview? That accurately record what you said?
Exactement ce que j'ai.
That is precisely what I said. He did indeed report to those two people, and I have just remembered that this interview took place quite some time ago, and it is possible to forget certain things.
And just on that issue, what was the source of your knowledge of the persons to whom this unit and the experts reported? What was the source of your knowledge of that information?
L'état-major.
The general staff itself provided that information, because when we went to meetings at the état-major, they monitored all units involved in operations, so they had reports from those units also, which were deployed in the West.
Now, I'm going to leave this topic now, and I apologise, I was a bit longer than I thought I would be. I'd like to move on now to your role as commandant of SECOS. So I'll ask you some questions about that. Just a few preliminaries. Do you recall when SECOS was created, the year?
2005.
2005.
And you were appointed commander when?
En 2005.
2005.
So were you the first and only commander of SECOS from the start right to and through the post-electoral crisis?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
By whom were you appointed commander of SECOS?
Le chef d'état-major
The chief of staff summoned me on one day, on a certain day, and then he told me that he would like to propose me to the Minister of Defense as the commander of a unit that had just been created. I asked him to give me at least 48 hours to think it over. I also asked him to give me the functions and structure of that future unit. And when he provided all that information, he asked me to go and think it over and come back after 48 hours. That is what I did. And after I returned, I gave him my agreement. I told him, General, I accept your proposal. And shortly afterwards, I was appointed commander of SECOS by decree.
Now, of course, you've told us you were commander of the École de Gendarmerie. Did you stay in that role at the same time as being the commander of SECOS?
Oui.
Yes.
Why was it that you occupied both roles, both as the commander of the school and also of this new unit?
Là, poser la question à mes chefs.
You have to ask the question to our bosses. I was able to assume those two positions at the same time, and that is what I did. Now, if you want to know why, you ask my bosses.
Well, perhaps I can just ask you this. Was there something in the way that SECOS was organized that meant that it made sense for you to retain your role as commander of the École de Gendarmerie as well?
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Bougnon, Mr. President.
C'est une opinion.
Mr. Bougnon, the council is asking for the witness's opinion.
I am, but he's a very sophisticated and high-level witness, and I think I can ask his opinion about his unit and the various roles he occupied, Your Honour, if I may.
Yes, but not as an opinion.
Not as an opinion.
I ask you to reformulate
Of course.
the question. Thank you.
Let me just go to your interview. I think it might be easier, and I can just remind you of something you said during your interview at 00510266, and it's at page 295 to... Yes, sorry. It's at page 0295. It's just about your double role. You're asked about that at line 1066. The interviewer says, quote,
And to your knowledge, was there an issue about your dual role at that time as the commander of the gendarmerie school, and you had now become the commander of SECOS? Was there any issue? Person interviewed. From the onset, that is the decision that was taken because it was necessary for that new unit to be based on what is known as a home unit or a host unit, which has the resources and which has infrastructures already in place, because the state could not and did not have the possibility of creating new infrastructures. And so it was necessary for this new unit to be supported by a unit that was already in existence, by a core that was already there, in order to facilitate its progression.
Does that actually record what you said in the interview? And are the contents true?
Affirmatif.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to ask a few questions then about your position in SECOS. You were subordinate to whom as commander of SECOS?
J'étais subordonné au chef d'état-major des...
I was subordinate to the Chief of Staff of the Armies and at the same time to the Minister of Defense.
Who gave you instructions, orders, in your position as commander of SECOS?
Vous avez dû certainement avoir un document.
You probably saw a document that is creating SECOS. The provisions are sufficiently clear. You have seen it. So I was not receiving instructions on a daily basis. There was a regulatory framework which was there, and I referred to that to carry out my work. So I was subordinate to the Chief of Staff and to the Minister of Defense, and it was to those people that I reported.
What about Cazarate, General Cazarate, your superior at the École de Gendarmerie? Did you have a relationship with him, in the reporting relationship with him when you were commander of SECOS?
J'avais de très bonnes relations avec...
I had a very good relationship with General Cazarate, but in my capacity as commander of SECOS, I did not report to him per se, but I had a relationship with him because a good number of the members of SECOS were members of the National Gendarmerie.
Now, when you say you reported to the Chief of Staff, how did you report to him in particular?
Le Je me rendais compte,
I reported to him by phone. We had what we referred to as summaries of daily activities, and he received those summaries, and he would know what we had done during the day. But those summaries were also sent to General Casarate and to the Director General of the Police.
What about the Minister of Defence? Did he receive those summaries as well?
oui.
Yes. But at one point, there was no specific unit within the ministry to deal with those types of operational situations. So over time, we focused mainly on the general staff, chief of staff. But if there was an event that was very, very important, I would report to the minister.
And you've spoken about written reporting and phone calls to the Chief of the General Staff. Did you have in-person meetings also?
Dans quel cadre?
In which circumstances?
Let's say during the post-electoral crisis, 2010, 2011, as commander of SECOS, were you having in-person meetings with the chief of the General Staff, the chef d'état-major? Sorry, the chief of staff in English?
Le chef d'état-major.
The chief of staff regularly convened all the generals to meetings. That is, all the generals that were in charge of major commands.
We'll come back to these later, but just briefly on this. We're talking here about the post-electoral crisis 2010-2011. When you say that he regularly convened meetings of all the generals in charge of the major commands, could we just go through and identify who those generals were and over which units they had command? We can start with, there was you. Who else?
Le commandant supérieur.
The Supreme Commander, the Director General of the National Police.
Could you include also their names for the chamber and certainly for me? The Supreme Commander, that is of the gendarmerie, that's Casarate, is that right?
Oui.
Yes.
Director General of the Police, Prt1 Gbagbo, is that right?
Prt1 Gbagbo.
Gbagbo.
Who else, please?
Le commandant des forces terrestres.
The commander of the land forces, General Deto. The commander of the air force, General Akpa. The commander of the navy, Admiral Fosigno.
Il y a d'autres officiers.
There were other officers. I no longer remember their names. There were other officers who were not necessarily generals, but who represented their commands.
And just on the topic of the regularity of these meetings, when you say regular meetings, what are you talking about? How frequently?
Je peux pas.
I cannot give you an exact frequency. it was possible to take place once a day in the afternoon, sometimes once every 2 days. It depended on the chief of staff, and during those meetings we spoke essentially about security. Mr. Altit, yeah.
Merci, Monsieur.
Mr. Altit, thank you, Mr. President, and I'm sorry for interrupting you. There are certain interventions that are indicated as inaudible in the transcript, and so the reading and understanding of the exchanges are a bit difficult. So maybe we can ask my learned friend to be a bit more slow, and ask interpreters also to indicate when there is a problem, so that we should be able to understand better. Thank you.
Of course, the speed is always an issue here in speaking, but just to say that we have no inaudible on the English transcript, so
Forgive me then.
that's why I didn't intervene. Otherwise, I would have intervened myself. Thank you, Mr. Altit. Please, just speak slower and.
I think I need to wait a bit for the French translation to interpretation to catch up, and I apologize. I will make myself move more slowly. Before you were interrupted, you were asked about the frequency of meetings. Let me just remind you where you were. You told us about the frequency of meetings with the Chief of Staff and other generals. Let me just move on. We'll come back to those meetings later. I want to ask you a few more questions, and unsurprisingly, with reference to the decree for SECOS that you mentioned earlier, a few more questions about SECOS specifically. The mission of your unit of SECOS was what?
Exactement ce que vous avez.
It is precisely what you have in the decree that you have in front of you. It was to fight effectively against major delinquency and criminality in the district of Abidjan.
Broadly, how was SECOS formed? Where did the elements come from?
C'est une unité.
It was a unit that included gendarmes, policemen, and soldiers.
Just a few numbers. At the outset, when the unit started up, how many elements were there in SECOS?
L'objectif que j'avais fixé.
The objective that I had set was to go up to 1,500 or 1,700 men, but I was not able to achieve that. So initially I was at about 1,400, 1,500.
And did you achieve the objective over time of 1,500, 1,700 men?
Non, bien au contraire.
No, quite to the contrary. The staff strength actually reduced. We had many, or rather much fewer people. So in 2010, 2011, we had gone down to around 1,200 men.
And let's just look then at 2010-11. At that time, can you tell us roughly the proportion of gendarmes, police, and also soldiers in Sekos?
C'est pas exactement précis.
What I'm going to tell you is not actually accurate. It is just approximate. There was about 50% of gendarmes, 45% of policemen, and about 5% of soldiers.
Who made these different elements available to you? So let's start with the gendarmes. Who made those available to you for purposes of Sekos?
J'exprime les besoins.
I would express our needs to the Supreme Commander, and then that's what he did, assign gendarmes to the Sekos.
And how about the soldiers? Who made those available to Sekos?
Le chef d'état-major.
The Chief of Army Staff.
And of course, we're talking from the start when Sekos was created about here, General Mongu. Is that correct?
Oui.
Yes.
And what about the police? Who made those available to you?
Le ministre de la...
The Minister of the Interior and the Director General of the Police.
Now, we spoke a bit earlier about your role, your dual role, as commander of the gendarmerie school and also of Sekos. Can you help us with this? Once the elements from the police, from the gendarmerie, from the army were appointed to Sekos, did they too, or what was their relationship with their original units in the gendarmerie, in the police, in the army?
Ces personnels-là restaient...
Those people were always under the organic command of their units of origin.
Mr. President, I realise it's 11 o'clock. Is now a convenient time to stop? Pause.
Yes, it could be. Yeah. It's 1 minute after, so we can, because we know, because we started a little bit later than 9:30, but it's okay. So we stop here. We have half an hour of break for you also to rest, and we come back at 11:30 for the continuing of the testimony. Thank you very much. The hearing is adjourned.
All rise.
We have half an hour of break for you also to rest, and we come back at 11:30 for the continuing